Hey, this is Brett from Prepared Man. Today we're going to talk about some actual bushcrafting, which means actually just crafting the things that you need to survive and to run your camp in the bush. We're not talking about cool little products that we've bought. We're not talking about cool tools. We're going to talk about a very minimal kit, just a couple of pieces of string and a knife. And then we're going to go into the woods and make some tools that's going to make your camp life go from roughing it to smoothing it. Hang with me, guys. Alright guys, for our first tool, I've just kind of wandered around in the woods, and behind me I have quite a few poplars growing, tulip poplars, and I'm going to use these tulip poplar branches. Now the thing that lets the tulip poplar get so tall in the woods is it stops providing nutrients and moisture to its outlying limbs as it grows taller, and these limbs fall off. As you know, I'm sure from your research, this is really good wood to make your bow drills out of, and the bark on it, which is still intact on this one, comes off very easy. It's very stringy. I can use it for natural cordage. I'll just pull a piece off here, twist it a couple times and show you. It becomes tough and stringy, and I can use it for small projects. But I'm going to use this bark to start our flint and steel fire to use these primitive tools. This limb itself is going to become two legs of a tripod that I'm going to show you how to lash together really easy. And here in just a couple minutes we're going to have a camp complete with tools to use to cook and to adjust our shelter. So I just wanted to give you a tip about these tulip poplar limbs before we get started. Hang with us, I'll be right back. One piece of information that I wanted to add to my video. I just cut this tulip poplar limb in two. I'm using this Laplander, and in order to get a good strong base I used a plumber's vise. The only difference is where I'm left-handed, I cut from the inside. If you're right-handed you can actually cut back here, or I could have switched legs and cut from behind me at a safe distance. If I was on uneven terrain, I'd make sure I was safe before I cut. This allows me to get my piece of wood nice and safe and stable where I can cut in. So I'm going to cut a couple of pieces and we'll come back together and I'll talk to you about what we got. Alright guys, today we're operating in the woods. I'm using a Laplander. I'm going to use a knife quite a bit. But the biggest tool that I'm going to use today is a piece of cordage. This is number 36 tarred bank line. In my line kit I keep a whole spool of this. I keep tons of it because it's cheap and easy to use as consumable line, but usually I also keep a couple pieces that are 8-10 feet long that I've already got prepped that I use, and sometimes I use this same piece of line over and over in camp until I consume it up or tear it up or lose it. So I'm going to make one real quick for you today. I'm just going to tie a bowline knot, which is an easy knot. You can look it up anywhere on the internet, and you're just going to take one bite. So you've got one loop with a standing end and a tag end, and I tie the wet weather one, so I'm going to tie another bite. So I just twist the line over and I make two loops. So once I get my line ready to tie the knot, I'll have my two bites. Tag end goes around the back of the loops, back over the standing end, and back through the loops. Now what this provides me, and I know that's a poor illustration on the video, it's so hard to shoot. What this provides me is with a non-compressing loop that will very easily, it doesn't bind, so I can untie this if I need to. So I've tied my bowline knot. I'm going to come back out and take about 9 feet. I know that's about 36 inches. I'm going to cut it off with my knife, and that's going to be my simple lashing for my tripod. So I've got my sticks cut, and now I'm going to lash them together. Alright guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 3 sticks that I've cut down, I'm going to lash them up tight and make a tripod with them. So I've got my piece of my 9 feet of number 36 bank line. I'm going to lay it out here, got my bowline knot, and I'm going to make it a snare configuration. Which means I'm going to take another bite, and that's going to be my loop that I feed through. And that'll keep my line from falling slack once I tie it. I'm going to come down about 8 inches, or my hand length at least, on the tripod. I'm going to bring my loop around and I'm going to tie right around my tripod and pull it taut. Let me get my slack here, make sure I don't have it caught on anything, pull it all the way through, and I've just made a lasso around all 3 sticks. I'm going to pull tight. You're just going to have to forgive my bush dog. He's got to see what I'm doing because he knows this is what we do before we start cooking. Now, a lot of people have more complex ways to do this. The simplest way to do this is just pull it down tight, crank it down. Now I'm going to start passing it between each timber, each of my sticks. I'm going to loop it around and crank it down tight. What that allows me to do is I've basically bound around these sticks to keep it tight, but it also lets them move independently. and in my camp kitchen or hanging my pack or however else I want to use this, and we'll talk about applications in a minute, I can adjust this tripod to use it in different ways. I've even used this to hang a Coleman lantern overnight. It's burned all night and never had a problem with it. Just simple lashings. So I'm going to pull all this tight, go around each piece at least once. This bank line's stout stuff, so it's not going to be a problem. Now, a knot that I actually haven't started using until recently, I actually like quite a bit, and I'm going to show you how I tie it. And this is an alpine butterfly knot. All I got to do is take another bite. So I've got a bite in the rope, it gives me a loop. Inside that loop, I'll make another loop. So now I have a figure 8 standing on top. I'm going to bring this figure 8 around the bottom of my line and pull it back through the bottom of the figure 8. And that gives me a loop. And I know, like I said, that's poor illustration just because of this video and the media that we have. But look it up, this is an alpine butterfly loop that I use to tighten down my knots with. You could also use any type of stand-in hitch that would have a bite. So there's my loop. I'm going to tighten back against that, and that's going to allow me to really crank down and get my lashings extremely tight. So I'm going to pull it real tight, then I'm going to tie my Clint Eastwood knot. It's any which way but loose. I'm just going to tie it off. I use slip knots just because I'm going to use this line again if it doesn't melt in the fire. I'll tie a series of slip knots, pass it through here, lock it down, and we're done. Now when I stand my tripod up and I get my legs going, it will hold itself tight. So we're going to zoom out, set up our tripod. Now I'm going to show you where we're going to build our fire. We're going to build a quick flint and steel fire, show you what we do with this excess, and come right back to you. Stick with us. Alright, these are my camp tools that I've made, just bushcrafted together real quick. They're not pretty, but they are functional, they do work. Now, the first thing I want to show you is my lid lifter, my pot lifter. It's just a stick with a hook on it. I use this stick with a hook. It's a fork out of a branch, and I just trimmed it down, cut it off, and left me about 10 inches. I can lift lids by applying leverage. I can lift pots up off the fire. I can use this stick for a lot of different things, just camp tasks. Another very simple thing I done was with a forked stick. This is a bifurcated stick. It's got 2 forks in it. I sharpened it, and I can use this as a fork. I've ate ramen with these. I've ate potatoes, meat, wild edibles like greens and things like that, poke salad, things like that. I've ate with a sharpened stick. Now, one thing, just a word to the wise, use some type of wood that you know what is. Definitely do not use pine, or you're going to get turpentine in your ramen noodles. People leave these sticking in their pot, it boils and boils and boils, and they wind up getting that turpentine taste in their ramen noodles. The last tool I want to show you before we go over to the tripod that we lashed together is these tongs. This is a nice springy green wood. I just drove down a wedge to separate them and lashed it together with a piece of bark, or I could use bank line. And I've made a set of tongs that I can move things around with. Recently, this winter, there was a gentleman that wrecked a Jeep, and he used tongs and heated rocks in the fire to stay warm and keep his children warm. And he could move hot materials. If I wanted to make more char material in my char tin, I can move it in and out of the fire. I can pick it up, I can move it, I can flip it over and do whatever I need to do without burning my hand. If I was going to use this in a big fire, I would make them much, much longer. So we're going to go over to the tripod in just a second. I'm going to show you how that works, and then we're going to sanitize some water in my Stanley kit. Alright guys, now that I've got my fire going, I've got my tripod up, I'm using my last tool that I wanted to show you, and this is just a toggle. If I have a pot with a bail, I can hook this toggle in that pot and it will dangle over the fire. I can adjust my legs of my tripod out to lower it or raise it or even swivel it off the fire. But right now we're going to dangle this pot over top of it. But one quick thing I want to show you with those tools is I'm going to move this Stanley pot straight into the fire. When it comes time to take that off, I can just separate my tongs out, catch it right above that lip, and move it back off the fire. So here's one of my camp tools used right in motion right here. So we're going to hook this up real quick. The Stanley pot hangs a little funny, but bear with me, and we're going to sanitize some water. I just use this toggle, I'll go through the loop, pinch my lid back closed. The toggle keeps the line from coming back out. I suppose you could tie some kind of fancy knot and do the same thing, but now I'm going to dangle this water. You'll notice it's off the fire. If I wanted it to hang in directly, I could leave it like this if I wanted to simmer, but I'm going to lower it down, boil this water, and sanitize it. So I'm going to spread out the legs of my tripod and let it lay down much lower until I get it where I want it, right over the fire. I can build this fire up to match it, but if I've got limited materials, once I separate all this down, I can get it dangling right over the fire, get a nice boil going, boil it for 12 minutes, sanitize my water, and be ready to go. Now, when this fire goes down, my water gets hot enough, I think it's sanitized. I can make coffee, I can make tea, I can set it back and let it cool and have drinkable water. And this is all with tools that I've made from the bush in my camp kitchen. Here in just a second, we're going to come back around, guys. I hope this has really helped you and good tools for you to use. I'm Brett with Prepared Man. Stay safe.